And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Rogers, the Executive Director for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your patience as we work through things this afternoon. It's great to have you with us for this virtual roundtable discussion on the federal budget. Canada's priorities as outlined within Budget 2021. We'll cover as much as we can over the next hour or so. We are extremely pleased to have with us the Honourable Minister Ahmed Hussein, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development from the federal government. Will more formally introduce Minister Hussein in just a few moments. Before getting too deep into our session today, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge that for most of us in the Okanagan that are tuning in today, even though we're doing this virtually, we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. We thank them for the rich history and culture. Some housekeeping items off the top, Minister. Thanks for your patience. We do want to acknowledge people at the front end. People tend to leave at the back end of Zooms fairly quickly. So we do these plugs when we do it virtually at the start, including acknowledging our close to 1,000+ members of the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce, in particular, our President's Circle members, those organizations that have invested in our organization, that believe in our mission, vision, and values, including Rogers for Business, Interior Savings, MMP, and UBC Okanagan. Also want to acknowledge our affinity program. We've seen a lot of businesses look at employee retention by focusing on employee benefits. The Chamber Group Insurance Plan is the #1 extended healthcare plan in the country. If you want to find out more, just let us know. Just a reminder for those, if you haven't registered for the Chamber Golf Tournament, it's too late. We are in a sold-out position. Though if you talk nicely to the president or myself, maybe we can find a way to get you on the links. Did want to make a mention, though, we have a couple of holes that are available. If you want to talk about sponsorship and marketing opportunities, just give the Chamber office a call. Coming up in our Business Smarts in June, wanted to flag this one. Women have been significantly impacted by COVID-19, and we're going to spend some time this year focusing on accelerating the advancement of women, including our partnership with Scotiabank that will be coming up in June, talking about strategic investing. It's a great way to make connections with some of the women that are leading business in Kelowna and the Okanagan. That's set for noon on Tuesday, June 15th. You can check out details on the Chamber website. Our Business Smarts program is presented by Associa British Columbia. If you're looking for additional resources and information on the pandemic, the COVID Response Coalition, made up of chambers from across the Okanagan, have set up Okanagan We've Got This.ca or .com rather. You can find that information on the website. There's a variety of excellent information and links to government resources. Plus, we celebrate some positive things that are happening in our region, including, if you check out on the advocacy page, and Minister, you want to check this one out, given your previous history, ministry involvement. It's a great video, anti-racism video produced by the South Okanagan Immigrant and Community Services Society, SOICS, and it was sponsored by the Chambers of Commerce. We know how important it is to create welcoming communities. A great video for you to play, and a prompter of great discussion around, unfortunately, what we see is the rising issue around racism and the need for all of us to speak up when we see that occurring. If you have a question in today's session, you likely know how Zoom works. Please feel free at any time to post a question to the Minister, any question you like, under the Q&A button. We'll also be monitoring the chat function as well. We're pleased to have with us Jeffrey Robinson, the chair of the Chamber Board, that will be part of our panel, along with Marina Warender from the KPMG. Many of you, Marina was part of our federal budget briefing session that we held just after the federal budget was tabled. So at this time, I'm going to just bring in, and we'll come live and ask our participants to bring their cameras now live. And thank the Minister for joining us, as well as Jeff Robinson, Marina Warender, and Minister. We have in Ottawa, I know it's been another busy day for you, so thank you for joining us today, and all the participants that are joining us, including we have MP Tracy Gray that has joined us as well. So Jeff, I'm going to turn things over to you just to do an introduction. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that introduction. I'm very pleased today to welcome the Honourable Ahmed Hussein as our guest today. He is the Member of Parliament for York South Weston and has represented that riding in Parliament since 2015. In November of 2019, the Prime Minister appointed him as Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. He's a community advocate and lawyer who immigrated to Canada at the age of 16 as a refugee. After attending high school in Hamilton, he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree at York University and co-founded the Regent Park Community Council. After earning a law degree from the University of Ottawa, he practiced law in the areas of criminal defense, immigration and refugee law, and human rights. Mr. Hussein has also previously served as Canada's Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. So with that introduction, I'd like us all to welcome Minister Hussein to us today, and I look forward to his remarks. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you to the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce and all of you for being with me today. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm joining you virtually from the city of Toronto. On the Parliament is not sitting this week, so I'm in Toronto on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee peoples, and the Wendat peoples. I wanted to really begin by highlighting Budget 2021 and mentioning that Budget 2021 has two main goals. One is to continue to help Canadian businesses, Canadian workers, Canadian families to get through COVID, because we're still going through the impacts of COVID, and COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing. The second goal of Budget 2021 is to make the necessary investments now so that we can have a strong, green, inclusive economic recovery for life after COVID, because we also recognize that as much as we are in the pandemic, COVID-19 will not be with us forever, and we will emerge from this, especially as more and more Canadians get vaccinated and we slowly and safely reopen our communities and our economy. So on the first goal, you're seeing the extension of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the extension of the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, the extension of CEBA, the extension of the Canada Recovery Benefit, and so on. But in the investment side, you're also seeing investments in skills training, $5.7 billion in investing in young people to double, for example, the Canada Student Grant from $3,000 to $6,000, which will help tens of thousands of low-income university and college students. You're seeing an investment, that same investment of $5.7 billion is meant to create 215,000 full-time jobs for young people, jobs of tomorrow. It's also meant to increase opportunities for skills training, increase opportunities for apprentices, $470 million in a new Canada apprenticeship program to help 50,000 first-year apprentices to connect with employers in construction and building trades unions. If you look at the big ticket item in Budget 2021, $30 billion to establish a Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare. What are we going to get for that $30 billion in the first 5 years? We intend to lower the childcare fees across the country by an average of 50% by the end of next year, and lower the fees further down to an average of $10 a day for childcare by 2025, 2026. And we will do so with provinces and territories. So it's $30 billion for the next 5 years, and then $9.2 billion federal investments for every year after that, permanently. And this is about showing provinces and territories, but also parents, that the Government of Canada is moving substantially in this regard, but also putting money over the long term. There is more supports for affordable housing. This is the 5th consecutive budget where there's more money for affordable housing, $2.5 billion additional in new money, but also allocated money from future years to this year in the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. More money for housing innovation, more money for the Rapid Housing Initiative that has been very successfully used in British Columbia to build rapid housing. The first billion that we brought forward in October, this is a brand new program. We intended to build 3,000 units. We're on track to build 4,777 units. Now we have an additional 1.5 billion because that program has been working so well, and we expect the same kind of uptake by communities. Last but not least, there's more money for social enterprises, and there's more money for nonprofits and charities to help them with core funding. There's the introduction of a Canada Service the Community Services Recovery Fund, $400 million going to charities and nonprofits to help them recover from COVID and modernize after COVID. So I'll leave it there. I know that we'll have a chance to get into details with respect to through questions and answers. So I will stop there and turn it back to you, Dan.
Well, thanks very much, Minister, and I'll bring in our other panelists, Jeff and Marina at this time. We have a series of questions that have been gathered in advance. A number, unfortunately, those that wanted to participate weren't able to join because they're maxed out. So, Minister, as you probably hear many stories across the country with respect to just maintaining things as we now in year 2 of pandemic. You know, I think I heard a comment the other day with respect to, you know, teachers are feeling stressed. I'm not sure there are not those in the workforce or anywhere where there isn't an enormous amount of stress because of the ongoing pandemic, from those that are responding to those that are dealing it to the small business owners that are out there. So that's a reality, and I suspect as Minister of Families, you're hearing some of that as well. We have some of those questions that were posed to us, so we'll work through those and encourage those that have joined us. We have a fair bit of time with the Minister, and he's been gracious in advising. He will do his best to answer any questions that arise, so feel free to pose those in the Q&A function. And as a reminder, we are recording today's session. We will be posting it in its entirety, Minister, on our various social media channels and on our YouTube channel, and we provide the feed for the media as well. And we are pleased that a couple members of our regional media have joined with us today. So with that said, I'm going to start things off, Minister, with the first question. And some of these will deal with your existing ministry, but also obviously by extension, the purpose of today's session is to talk a little bit about the budget and certain aspects of it. So let's start with one of those items that you had mentioned around affordable housing. I think yes. We in the Okanagan, you know, a lot of us were, okay, we're in a pandemic, yet we've never seen such an acceleration in housing prices. There's a bit of a disconnect in that reality, in that, yeah. Okay, we're in a pandemic and there's a crisis, yet house prices are soaring. Some of that are driven by a variety of factors, both market related and government related. But when you look at housing and the fact of home ownership, for a long time, and certainly in North America, has looked at that home ownership as a goal to achieve. But in looking at major metropolitan areas, and I would include Kelowna, where we're one of the fastest growing regions in the country, yes. House prices are high, and we are hearing from young families, they're having a tough time to get into the housing market. Is this a cultural shift that is occurring that, you know, we need to give up on that dream and think just in terms of rental, as some jurisdictions around the world have shifted? Or is that still a reasonable dream for young families to have? And what specifically is in the budget that will help address making housing more affordable for young families, not just subsidized housing for those that need that type of support, but market-based housing? What initiatives will help and give some of those that still would like to dream about owning a home in Canada?
You know, we're very much obviously keeping a very close eye on the housing market. we're very much supportive of more and more Canadians having access to home ownership, especially first-time home buyers. And that's why, as a government, we introduced the first-time home buyer incentive, even before this pandemic, as you know, much earlier. But Budget 2021 does take into account the current reality. And we have revisited the first-time homebuyer incentive, as we had promised to do in 2019, by increasing the maximum threshold of the value of a home that's eligible for the first-time homebuyer incentive, especially in the markets of the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Vancouver area, and Victoria, by increasing the threshold, but also by increasing the eligible household income from $120,000 to $150,000. We're also increasing the number of times that, the ratio between the household income and the amount that you can borrow from 4 times your household income to 4.5 times your household income. All these measures are ways to enable, again, first-time home buyers to have access to that dream of home ownership. In addition to that, Budget 2021 contains a proposal to introduce a 1% tax next January on non-resident, non-Canadian owned real estate that is vacant or underused. And that measure, we approximate, will generate $700 million a year to the Government of Canada, which we intend to invest right back into affordable housing solutions for Canadians. So that's essentially what we're doing for home ownership. We are committed to continuing to monitor the market to see how else we can help Canadians, especially first-time home buyers. In terms of the larger national housing strategy, that's a very ambitious program. It has grown from $40 billion to $72.5 billion program. This is also equally a question of supply. So we have to build more supply. We've been doing that. We have to work closely with provinces and territories, as well as municipalities, who have a lot of tools, by the way, to stimulate more supply, to do more to encourage mixed housing, for example, and access to more affordable homes. So, we are providing federal leadership. We are making the lion's share of investments. But having said that, we can't do this alone. For Canada to meet or even hopefully exceed the targets that we have in the National Housing Strategy, we can't do it alone. We need provinces to step up. We need municipalities. In this space, by the way, municipalities have a lot of tools to put on the table to provide leadership as well, to stimulate and encourage more housing options for Canadians. So I must say that, we're making a lot of progress with the National Housing Strategy, but more is needed, and we're determined to make sure that we do that, and Budget 2021 actually addresses that.
So, Minister, I'm going to go to Marina in just a moment for our second question, but a follow-up on that, if you don't mind, and I'll set the context by advising we had the provincial finance minister on shortly after they tabled their budget, which was right after yours, so we were busy during that time period. You may be aware that in BC, the provincial government imposed the speculation tax on just a few geographic regions. Yes. One of those is on the city of Kelowna and West Kelowna. We've been opposed to it. Partly we have suggested that it is not achieving the outcome. The outcome, it's penalizing more Canadians than foreign ownership, and there's not clarity that the money being raised is being reinvested back into a more affordability or rental spaces. So it's not achieving the outcomes. But with that said, we did suggest to the minister and queried whether the provincial government will then withdraw from that space if the federal government is going to have its own 1%. Are you saying today that there will be legislation or something in regulations that will guarantee any money made in that is reinvested in affordable housing? You mentioned that that money that will be raised by that foreign ownership will be reinvested. Will that be entrenched, or will it?
We have said we've made that public commitment. I don't know what form that will take, but I am the minister responsible for the National Housing Strategy, and I will make this commitment to you and to your members that any money we raise from that 1% tax on vacant homes owned by non-Canadian, non-resident owners will be reinvested in affordable housing solutions for Canadians. You have that commitment from me. I've also forgot to mention the rental construction financing initiative, which is just one part of the National Housing Strategy. In December, went from being a $13.75 billion program to being a $25.75 billion program. We've increased it by an additional $12 billion. And one of the best users of the rental construction financing initiative is the province of British Columbia. BC accounts for almost a third of all the projects funded through the rental construction financing initiative, even though the population in British Columbia is about 15% of the Canadian population. So you're punching above your weight, and you're really using a program that is meant to alleviate and reduce pressure on rental rates in large urban centers. So this is a program that is working really great. It builds affordable rental units across the country. So it builds mixed housing. So usually about a third of the units are deeply affordable, a third are somewhat affordable, and then a third are market rental units. But even those, by putting more of them into the market, it reduces pressure on the rates because, as you know, more developers build to own than to rent. And so the very people who run our municipalities, who make our cities more livable and enjoyable and improve our quality of the cities, teachers, firefighters, paramedics, construction workers, those who are being priced out of the rental markets of major cities are the ones that we target with the rental construction financing initiative, because we want them to stay in these cities. We want them to work, play, and grow in those cities. And rental construction financing initiative is achieving exactly that. It is an amazing program. And that's why we've increased it by $12 billion, because it works so well.
Yeah, we may come back to this. Prior to you joining us, Minister, we did have a brief conversation about housing. It's a critical issue for us in the Okanagan with an aging demographic, with a growing economy. We want to attract more young families. We need to, from a labor force perspective. Yes. We also want to attract more immigrants and newcomers and skilled workforce and grow the manufacturing sector, as an example. And the key to that is affordable housing, to be able to look at and have people, when they're immigrating to Canada, as an example, to consider the Okanagan and growing communities like ours. And with the price of housing, that's a detriment. So we may come back depending on time. I want to move along and go to Marina for a question with respect to the budget. Marina?
Thanks, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today. So my question is going to be around the huge deficits that we have. So I want to shift the focus a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think we all kind of were anticipating a big spending budget. There were lots of concerns around the pandemic that had to be addressed. And like you said, there were big investments to be made. There was a lot of rumors beforehand on the revenue side, where the government might be able to increase revenue from like increased capital gains rates, talking about the principal residence exemption. All those kind of rumors went around. So when the budget actually came, I think I'm working in the accounting world, so a lot of us were actually surprised how little was in the budget to address the significant deficit that we have, like $354 billion alone for 2021. So I guess my question is like, how are you going to be addressing this huge deficit going forward? Are you seeing any a need to increase revenue on the side, so keep up with that spending at some point? So what should we really expect there?
Well, number one, I would point out to, for example, the big ticket item, putting together a Canada-wide system for early learning and childcare. This program alone has been studied by, the economic impact of this program has been studied by non-governmental entities, and they've published their reports. And they've said that investing in an affordable, high quality, early learning and childcare system from coast to coast to coast will result in the closing of the gap entirely between men and women's participation in the labor market. It will add double digits every single year, in double digit billions every single year, depending on which study you look at, into the economy every single year. It'll address labor market shortages. It will increase productivity, and it'll generate more tax revenues from more people working in both provincial and federal coffers. The estimated conservative number of women who are prevented from working or starting a business because they don't have access to affordable childcare is estimated to be about 250,000 women. The economic impact of those women having access to affordable childcare and then going back to work is immense. So that's a program that, again, big ticket item, but huge return on investment, much more than the expenditure. The other pieces are also about taking advantage of this moment in time to invest in young people, to invest in greening the economy, to make sure that we address the skills gap and the labor market shortages in certain industries. We take the philosophical view that now's the time to invest. Now's the time to be there for Canadians. If we don't support Canadian businesses, they will close and lay off those Canadian workers who will then not be able to support themselves and their families. And so then when the economy reopens, it'll take longer and it'll be a weaker recovery. If you look at the last recession that we had, it took much longer, and it was more painful for Canadians to recover from that recession, because the previous government had the idea of not investing as much in communities and businesses. And we take the opposite view. We feel that this is the approach to enable Canadians to recover faster, stronger, but more inclusively, right? To ensure no one's left behind. Early learning and childcare is an example of that, but there's other pointers of that in the investments that we're making. And the proof is there. I mean, if you look at the jobs that we lost at the very beginning of the pandemic, we've recovered about 80% of those jobs. They're back. Compare that with the United States, they've only recovered about 50% of the jobs that they lost. So our programs are working, our measures are working. We always said that we will taper programs like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. They'll slowly but surely and gradually taper off as we reopen and recover. But now's the time to support Canadians. And if we don't do it now, it'll be even much harder on them and on the economy to bounce back stronger and more inclusively.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. I'm going to go now to Jeff for another question that was submitted in advance. Jeff?
I'm going to pick up with a question which builds on Dan's mention of immigration and building our labor force. And we've recently in the Kelowna Chamber had some demographics shown to us that we'll be growing, but also growing a lot older unless we replenish with kind of young energy. And we see immigration being a major cause or major source for that. But Kelowna historically has not attracted immigrants the same way that a Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver has. And it seems that as part of social development as an overall agenda and a unifying of Canada, that it would be good if we could have more immigration into a community like Kelowna. What can a community like Kelowna do to attract those immigrants and then really integrate them into our local economy?
I think that's a very good question. I've always believed, in my previous role as Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, I've always believed that communities that really take the time to make attracting skilled newcomers to their community as a key plank in their economic development, really start to see results. And I'm not suggesting that Kelowna is not doing that already, but I was always surprised by how many programs exist federally to attract skilled immigrants, programs that can be used by employers and communities, and how some of those programs, not all, but how some of those programs were not as well known. For example, there's a really great program called Mobilité Francophone, which allows any employer in Canada to bring a French-speaking skilled worker and exempts them from the labor market impact assessment LMIA requirement. Now, that doesn't mean that that skilled worker has to only speak French. They could speak French and English, right? And a lot of times they do. But that is one of the things that that always surprised me. Great program, not used as much as it should. And I'll give you an example. I would go to roundtables with business groups, with business owners. And before I would start my comments, I would say, how many of you have heard about the program called Mobilité Francophone? And one person would raise their hand, right? So there's programs like that that can be really utilized by the local employers to harness their ability to attract skilled workers. Another one is international students. Now, they're not part of the formal planned permanent residents that we welcome every year. And in fact, that's one of the advantages, is that there's no ceiling to international students. But international students are a great group, a target group of people that can be directed to settle into the community once their education is finished. And I don't just mean educational institutions around Kelowna, but it could be the community marketing itself to beyond your comfort zone. So targeting those students in markets in Canada like Ontario and the Lower Mainland and others, where there's a surplus of international students, to say, hey, to appeal to them and say, have you considered our community? And you'll be surprised at how many of them will say, you know what, I didn't know you guys existed, but now that I've seen your stats, I like it. I like what you're offering, and I'm going to move there. I've seen those stories all the time, but it requires a certain level of, prioritization and really making it a strategic economic development tool. But the tools are there, and I'm happy to talk about that as much as needed. Another one is a really great program called the Student Direct Stream, which I expanded as Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. The program contained 4 countries at the time. It's an expedited international student stream. So when I became minister, I increased it from 4 countries to 7. So there's now 7 countries that use that program. You could target them. You could target particular programs within the international students. But I believe that many international students are looking beyond Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and you would be pleasantly surprised by their uptake if you market places like Kelowna and others and give them that path to permanent residency by using federal immigration programs. And by the way, the timing couldn't be better, because as you know, our government has just announced way more flexible options for international students to become permanent residents. We have also removed the requirement to be physically in Canada taking classes to build the residency requirement. So now, because of COVID, we allow international students doing online courses outside of Canada to count 100% of that time as residency in Canada. I mean, the timing couldn't be better. The immigration levels will go up after next year. Our plan is to increase immigration levels yet again to 401,000 permanent immigrants, permanent residents, sorry, I should say, which gives more space to international students to access pathways to permanent residency. But we're also creating more pathways for temporary foreign workers to access permanent residency. I created the Rural Immigration Pilot Program. I created the meat cutters and the agricultural workers permanent residency program, and so on and so forth. So even within the provincial nominee program, we created more and more spaces every single year, and that trend will continue. So take advantage of these programs and really make it as part of a key plank in your economic development strategy. It shouldn't be seen as an immigration program for Kelowna. It should be seen as an economic growth agenda. And when you do that, you'll see the results.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to turn it back over to Marina for another question, I think in the tax area, not surprising. So thanks, Marina.
It's and we kind of touched already on it a little bit. So the main revenue measures this year in the budget were really related to the new tax, the 1% tax on vacant homes, and then the luxury tax, which I found interesting that both of them are in some sort already within BC already implemented provincially. Yes. We have the SPAC tax here, and we also have the luxury PST tax for high valuable vehicles. So I guess my question is around, so is that a model that was just duplicated from there or something to look to? And then the other question is that going to be integrated, or is that going to be, are we going to be stuck with two systems here, especially around housing? Are we going to end up with a SPAC tax on top of this vacant tax, or is that going to be some sort of integration happening?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I don't have a final answer on this because part of our budget announcement with respect to this 1% proposed tax is that the reason why we're introducing it in January is to allow time between now and then to actually consult folks, to consult industry, to consult across the country, precisely to answer the questions that you just posed. How will this 1% tax be implemented? How will it interplay with provincial measures? Is there a need to do more? So we'll be talking to housing advocates, we'll be talking to the real estate sector, we'll be talking to municipal leaders, we'll be talking to provincial counterparts, we're talking to the whole industry and chambers of commerce, of course.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Thanks, and we definitely will likely we'll definitely have more engagement with you as the minister responsible on the housing file. We certainly see that as a big one as it relates to, as we talked about, the workforce. We had a question with respect to the budget. There was some pre-budget discussion about the creation of a new economic delivery agency in British Columbia, similar to what we see in an RDA in Atlantic Canada. There was also communication and correspondence and support letters from a variety of sources to consider the Okanagan for establishment of a satellite office if the federal government was to develop a new regional development agency to further economic development in BC. Can you give us any more details with respect to that funding initiative? I know you're certainly not the Minister of Finance, but as a member of Cabinet, we worked with the economic development professionals, local government, to really lobby for, in advance of the budget, for that investment. Can you speak to that?
I can speak to it insofar as saying that I'm supportive, and I know this is something in the purview of Minister Melanie Joly. She's the minister responsible for the regional development agencies. I am not up to speed on the latest decisions on the proposed British Columbia Regional Development Agency. But what I will say is I'm very supportive. I believe now is the time to do it.
Can you expand to your your thoughts in your ministry with respect to a little bit of a theme which we talked about earlier, and obviously as the largest chamber in the Okanagan Valley, this region we want to focus on. Is there initiatives that you believe should focus, and I'm conscious you're from the Toronto area as a member of Parliament, to help some of those secondary growth areas like the Okanagan, where it's outside the major metropolitan areas, but great potential, and there's numerous examples outside of Metro Toronto where that could be. Is there a conscious effort during some of the budget discussions to ensure that there's rural development? And
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, for sure, especially with the Minister of Rural Economic Development, the Minister of Regional Development Agencies, Minister of Finance, myself through housing and early learning and childcare. I mean, we take a rural and regional lens to everything that we do, making sure that our policies are working everywhere. In terms of that, economic development strategy, I think immigration is central. Housing, early learning and childcare to tap into women who and parents, but especially women with children who are disproportionately impacted by COVID, for example. They were the first to lose their jobs and the last to go back. And how can we make that better with investments in early learning and childcare? That includes early learning and childcare opportunities in rural and remote communities. But I think, in my experience, I think what works is when you have a collection of everything. So you have a community that centralizes the economic importance of aggressively seeking skilled workers to come with their families. That's really important to build roots in the community, but also accessing federal housing dollars by exercising leadership at the municipal level to unlock those federal dollars. You'll be surprised how municipality A can put no incentives on the table or do nothing pretty much in terms of doing work on its planning or permitting process to attract or unlock dollars for housing. Whereas municipality B, if, by working with the nonprofits, by putting forward portfolio applications, by putting some incentives like waiving development charges, for example, or giving up some pieces of land, you will be surprised how much housing money that unlocks in some situations. Or even sometimes accessing innovation dollars, federal innovation dollars, to build housing. The Housing Innovation Fund through Budget 2021 is set to receive an additional $600 million. Now that's money that is open to not just the private sector, not just the public sector like municipalities, but even the nonprofit sector. They can use that money to build real housing in innovative ways. I was meeting a couple of weeks ago with a group of university students, engineering students, who had built this really innovative home in a First Nations community. And this home was not only inexpensive to build, but it was energy efficient. And in fact, through the use of solar panels in the roof, they were generating power back to the grid and saving a lot of money for the residents. They used the housing innovation money pre-budget 2021 to build that prototype. And now they're thinking of accessing the housing innovation money again to replicate this across the country. If a group of university students can do this, certainly a municipality can do this. And so my job has been to really engage the municipal leaders to harness these opportunities and do whatever they can to maximize these federal investments and incorporate them in regional or municipal economic development strategies.
Minister, I'm sensitive to our time. You've been very gracious with your time with us this afternoon. We do have a couple more questions I'd like to try to squeeze in quickly and remind those that have joined us, if you want to get a quick question in, please use the Q&A. We are set to conclude no later than 2:30, so we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to go to Maria for a quick question and similarly a response from yourself. Marina, I think this one was on childcare, or?
Exactly. So next I want to talk about the National Childcare Program. Probably a program that was highly expected by, or not expected, but made young families really excited. Having paid lots of childcare dollars myself, yes. Everybody can relate to that. And it's a great program to get young mothers in particular back into the workforce, which we all are excited about. And you kind of started touching on it a little bit on your opening remarks, but if you can just extend a little bit on it, when should we actually be able to see the first progress on it? When can we actually see first results? How are you going to deal with the whole situation around because one thing is like to subsidize childcare, but the other issue is extending childcare, because yes. Same thing, yes. It's such an issue to find quality childcare. So in combination with the housing crisis we're going through right now, it's going to make it even so much tougher to find appropriate spaces where you can open up those spots. So if you can just extend on how you envision how to roll out this program.
Well, first of all, we understand that this is not going to be a quick fix. This is about building a system, and building a system takes time. However, we also want in parallel to deliver quick results for Canadian parents, quick relief. So that's why we're promising to reduce childcare fees by an average of 50% by the end of next year. That's pretty ambitious. And then moving towards $10 on average, $10 a day childcare by 2025, 2026. So that's pretty ambitious. But we also intend, in addition to making the system more affordable, deeply affordable, to increase the number of spaces. Because there's no use in having affordable childcare if you can't get the spaces. There's far too many children in Canada who are in wait lists for affordable childcare. How are we going to deal with quality? Well, both increasing spaces and increasing quality and making sure quality remains high, both of those need early childhood educators. So we have to also work with provinces and territories to train more and recruit more and retain early childhood educators. We had already started this work in the fall economic statement. There was a proposal to invest $420 million from the Government of Canada to provinces and territories just for early childhood educators. So depending on the province or territory, they're only supposed to use that money for early childhood educators, either training more, recruiting more, keeping retention, or all of the above, right? The Canada-wide system money for budget 2021 intends to do the same. So we want to build an early learning and childcare system across Canada that is affordable, high quality, delivers high quality early learning and childcare, but is also inclusive of all children. You know, that every child in Canada has to see themselves as being reflected in this system. So for example, Canadian children with disabilities have to see themselves accommodated in this system and accessible, meaning more spaces. So the good news is we're putting significant dollars on the table to get this done. And we believe we can get this done. The second piece of good news is the provinces will join us to get there. And the other good news is we're not starting from zero. Since 2017, we have had agreements between the Government of Canada and each and every province and territory in Canada, where we transfer federal dollars to build more affordable childcare spaces. And they report back to us on what they've done with those federal dollars. So we already have a framework. We already have a foundation to build on. And so we're going to build on that and ensure that literally every child in Canada, no matter where they are born and no matter what their household income is or what region they're born into, has access to affordable, high quality early learning and childcare that's inclusive and accessible. British Columbia is already there. They were already experimenting with $10 a day using some of the federal dollars. They want to join us in this Canada-wide system. They've said this publicly, and we will be working with British Columbia to get to a quick agreement so that we can deliver relief for parents in British Columbia from the high fees that they're paying now, and build more spaces together and recruit and train more teachers.
So, thanks, Marina. And Jeff, I'm going to go to you. We are going short in time. If you want to add one more question or a thought to the minister.
Well, I guess my thought would be, in your answer to Marina's question about the budget deficit, I think you referenced the fact that we're adding 250,000 women to the workforce, and that's an example of how we build an economy. But the scale of the deficits are so large now, like historically large, and they're historically large. And so, for example, if you add 250,000 women to the workforce and they pay, say, $10,000 in taxes, that's $2.5 billion, which is almost nothing compared to $354 billion, our current deficit. And so what I'm asking you is, it's great in theory that we're building our economy, and I think nobody's going to disagree with investing in our economy. But what sense or what analysis does your government have to say that these investments are going to pay off in the ways they must pay off? Because otherwise, I think the big fear is we see ourselves back in the early 90s where it's like time to tighten the belt, and nobody likes that. So does this government have that kind of analysis, that kind of rigorous projection for bringing us back on track?
Yes, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland has shared this with in public and with fellow parliamentarians on the plan forward. And in fact, if you look at our stimulus plan, our plan to invest in people and business and the nonprofit sector in Canada, it's very similar to what every other G7 country is doing. And in fact, our plans, our programs compare favorably with others. In other words, there's other G7 countries that are even going bigger than us. So we're being responsible, and our programs and our investment plans for stimulus are actually very much in line with our G7 partners. And I would say we are actually somewhat in the middle to lower end of the pack in terms of the amounts that we're proposing compared to others who are proposing to spend even more. So we're being responsible, and we are, and Minister Freeland has presented that detailed plan to get us back from this.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Minister. We are running close to time here, and I want to try at least targets. I don't think I will hit 2:30, but we'll target that to wrap things up now. With that said, we will look forward to the opportunity. Minister, have you been to the Okanagan?
Yes, I have actually. Yeah. I was there in 2019 in the summer. It's a beautiful part of Canada.
So we look forward to having you back, particularly with the minister responsible on the housing file, which is an issue certainly close to our heart in the Kelowna Chamber and through chambers through the Okanagan. Well, I suspect everywhere, because it's such a big influence on our economy. Would look forward and would love to have you out when it's safe to do so. So we'll ensure that we keep in touch. The question I have before you leave us, Leafs versus Habs, Oilers versus...
Of course, Leafs. I mean, there's no way the Habs are going to beat us. So I'm a Leafs fan through and through.
So as a Montreal Canadian fan, I'm not sure what Carey Price's health is, but as a BC boy, we hope he flies high for the Montreal Canadiens. But
absolutely.
Minister, I want to thank you on behalf of those that have gathered, Marina, Jeff, and those that have organized this session for spending a bit of time for us today. I know the focus was talking a bit about the federal government's budget, but we strayed into some areas that I'm sure are dear to your heart, not only with your current ministry, but in your previous position. So thanks for your willingness to answer a wide variety of questions. Want to thank you for joining us, and want to leave time if you have a quick comment to wrap things up today.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much to all of you and for having me today and for proposing some really thoughtful and insightful questions. I'm happy to connect with all of you to talk a little bit about Budget 2021 and the plan that our government has to invest in people, to invest in families and businesses and the nonprofit sector. We have a plan to continue to help Canadians deal with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, because the pandemic is not over. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to invest in Canadians to prepare them for an inclusive and green and strong economic recovery. So that's what Budget 2021 is about. I'm very happy to join you virtually. Hopefully we'll see each other in person sooner rather than later. And thank you once again for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And thanks, Marina and Jeff, for joining us as well. We hope you'll all have a great day. I know it's late in the day well, you're in, I'm assuming Toronto.
I am in Toronto.
I can't assume anymore, right? You could be just about anywhere, but
no, I'm in Toronto now. Yeah, and I know that I think Jordan wanted a picture, if that's okay.
Yeah, certainly we'll hang.
I'll take it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I do want to extend a thank you for those that have joined us online as well. Thanks for joining us for this session. We'll try to keep you posted. If you have any thoughts about how things went today or any suggestions of future discussions for virtual roundtables, please let us know just by contacting the Chamber office. Thanks and have a great day.